brought it. And in closing, I'd just like to say we're at the cusp of monumental change about how we approach conservation and community in this country. I just know we all feel it. I feel like we're the ones who can hear the migrating geese coming our way, but not everyone has heard it yet. And yet they're coming, and transformative conservation is coming. And looking around this room, I feel hopeful and convinced that we will see that transformative change in our time. And I think that people everywhere will start to embrace the thinking of people like Australian environmentalist John Seed, who said, "I used to say, I am protecting the rainforest. Now I say, I am part of the rainforest, protecting myself." So with that, I would like to turn it over to our two final speakers. Jim Levitt is manager of the Land Conservation Programs at the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy, also the director of the Program on Conservation Innovation at Harvard University. He got a nice shout out from Joel Dunn earlier. We don't know what that cost him, but he's been a leader in conservation innovation, including 4 wonderful books about it. And the Lincoln Institute, of course, was very instrumental in founding this network. And just so we can have a nice final flow, I'm going to pre-introduce Gary Tabor, who you met earlier on the final panel. He is still the founder and executive director of the Center for Large Landscape Conservation. That's good, good. In addition to co-founding this network and now serving as the fiscal sponsor, his conservation catalyst work includes co-founding the Yellowstone to Yukon Conservation Initiative and the Roundtable of the Crown of the Continent. So please join me in welcoming Jim Levitt.
So Gary, just to be fair, I am not Gary Tabor. Okay. I want to do something at the end here because I know that people are already on Google Maps routing their way home. I want everybody to take their hands off of their computer and their telephone and then close that device. Unless you're taking notes, and I'm really serious about this, I want to actually have everybody in this room. I've been sitting at the back for most of the time, and I know at any given time about a quarter of the people aren't actually here. So I actually want you to close your computers, if you can. Okay. 2 expressions of gratitude. One, Emily, I know how hard it is to organize a conference like this. Emily spent more than a year doing this. It is a Herculean task. So to Emily, to Sean, to Julie Reagan, to Bob Bendick, to Laramie Maxwell, to Cass Bismeyer, and to Gary Tabor, well done. Okay, so just for a minute, let's get real, the way we did just for a second yesterday. Depending on, which television station you watch, maybe the sky's a little bit brighter today or maybe not. But this is still a pretty tense, uncertain, sometimes scary time to be a large landscape conservationist. We don't really know what's ahead. And we've got, among 1,000 things that we could talk about, at least 3 things that are going on that are, at least for me, of serious concern. And I want you to think for each of these about the island of Puerto Rico. We have angry, deeply divisive politics. We have rising inequality. And if you just think for a second about Puerto Rico and people who don't have clean water to drink who are American citizens, you'll know what I'm saying. And we have today in this season of the year powerfully destructive impacts from climate change. And I don't think there's a single person in this room that would dispute that. Yet, as this conference has beautifully demonstrated, the landscape continues to pull us together. Divisive politics? Look at Mark Anderson's map from yesterday and the many, many maps that we've seen. We're all thinking across jurisdictions, across national boundaries. We know that the job ahead of us has to be across political boundaries, across sectors, across time. I want to particularly give a shout out, if she's still here, to Chanel Smith, the African-American woman from the Rust Belt, Cleveland, who just did an incredible job at expressing how we can bridge those divides that still exist among us. Rising inequality. I had the pleasure and the honor of being with our last Secretary of the Interior, Sally Jewell, earlier this week. And I asked her a question that I've asked many audiences, and I got the same answer. Could she name a single jurisdiction in the United States, a political boundary, so I'm not talking about water districts, that did not have a public park? And she could not. Now, there may be some organized territory somewhere in Maine that doesn't have a park. I'm not sure. But given all the things that we struggle with in this country, every single jurisdiction, at least nearly, in this country has a park, has a place where people can go to be outside and enjoy the air and the earth. So we're making progress. We have a lot more progress to make. But once again, in this case, it's the land that brings us literally together, from the Boston Common to the Santa Monica Mountains. In addition, the statistics that Ernest Cook lent to Sasha this morning showed that in 2016, nearly 8 in 10 bond initiatives totaling $11 billion for open space were voted for by the American people. And this year, in an off year, more than $1 billion were dedicated to the same cause. So it isn't like the American people don't understand and care about the issues that we're focused on. Year after year after year, no matter who's in office, they vote for open space. And they're depending on us to continue this job going forward. Again, the landscape brings us together. Destructive climate change, there is no denying what's happened to the island of Puerto Rico. It is a devastating loss. There are hundreds of thousands of American citizens moving to the mainland because they don't have electricity, and they don't have water, and they don't have food, and they don't have health care. This is not something out in the future. This is something happening right now, not in Bangladesh, although that's terrible too, but to our fellow American citizens. So what are we doing about it? We're building these really inventive microgrids that are solar powered, that are bringing some light to the people who are carrying on in Puerto Rico. And we are doing great science. I know the question earlier was rhetorical about, do we need more science? But hell yes, we need a lot more science. We should never give that up. We need more of what Mark Anderson is doing. We need more of what Joel Dunn is doing. We need more of what the LCCs are doing. We have to have that for many, many decades in this century and, of course, beyond. It's the only way we're going to understand what's going on. So when somebody denies the validity or the usefulness of the extremely important work that you're doing, carry on. Because the landscape can pull us together. So if we're not engaged at the highest levels of government right now, as we might imagine that we should be, let's use this time to prepare. If we don't personally sometimes have the courage to get up in the morning and go back and do what needs to be done, call the person on your left or on your right and ask them what they're thinking, because I know there's a lot of hope and a lot of determination in this room right now. So let's get real. Let's carry on. Thank you.
Jim, that was brilliant. I'm not Jim Levitt because of that kind of inspiration and wisdom, and that was just absolutely brilliant. I am the last word between you and wherever else you're going, so I thought maybe I'd keep it small and just invoke science and religion. Can I have my first slide on? So last week, thanks to Susan Holmes, and you can start it now, yeah, we asked Ed Wilson how much is enough, and he couldn't get his arms wide enough. And he was trying to explain what 50% for nature or half Earth is. So I thought if we're going to invoke the religious science, Ed Wilson is kind of the icon of that. Next slide, please. And he actually had some wisdom in his book Consilience in 1998. He said, "We are drowning in information while starving for wisdom. The world henceforth will be run by synthesizers, people able to put together the right information at the right time, think critically about it, and make important choices wisely." And I believe that that is the role of everyone in this hall. This is not only collective information, this is collective wisdom. And the world needs our wisdom more than ever. You folks are the light on this issue, and that hopefully we have inspired you to work together with us in sharing that light. Now, this gets into religion. Next slide. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, to Jewish parents who were raised in Montana, and my grandparents were from Montana. So I'm a religious erratic. When your grandfather was the rabbi, the first rabbi for the state of Montana in the late 1890s, you can't imagine, how lonely that might have been, but folks don't know that Montana at that time had one of the largest Jewish communities. Unfortunately, because of economic reasons, my parents moved east and I was raised in Baltimore, only to listen my whole life that when we lived in Montana, we used to have to walk to school when it was negative 40 degrees outside. But, I felt like disconnected from my own geography. But being Jewish, you always talk about chosen people, and I never knew what that meant. Well, let me put that in the context of this conference. All of you were chosen. This was an invite-only meeting. This was a meeting because all of you are leaders in your own sector to carry on the vision and work of landscape conservation. Now, if you remember in that great Hollywood Spielberg Lucas movie collaborative, Indiana Jones. And if you understand what this facility was and what's underneath it, you know, this is the storage room where the Ark is buried underneath there. So there's a religious significance to this room. And if you don't think that this room looks like the Ark, Noah's Ark, you know, there is some, you know, comparison here that you were chosen. And we didn't pick all the right people. We still need more people here. Chanel and Lauren, you mentioned it. We don't have everyone in the Ark, but this is the Ark for where we are now. And we need you to go forth because you are the Network for Landscape Conservation. It's not someone else. You are the Network for Landscape Conservation. We are the safety net for nature. What will you do now? What are you thinking now? Not Monday, not when you get home. What will you do now? Every time you have a pause in the day, just take that pause and say, what will I do now for the network? Think about it. We need this energy and this community to stay together from the moment I stop speaking. Now, I'm going to quote another famous Jewish person, Mr. Spock. Because I'm going to build on what Joanne said. A community that is connected lives longer. So I would say, live long and prosper.